Hi, this is Wayne Sutton of BUILDUP.vc, and welcome to the first episode of Pathways to Tech. And today I am extremely happy to announce our first guest, Jotaka, Eaddy, and Jewel Burks. If you can just give a brief, short introduction of yourselves, that would be great.
Sure, I'll start. Hello, everyone. My name is Joel Burks, and I am diversity evangelist at Google and also CEO of PartPic. I'm super excited to be here on this Hangout today.
Great. Hi everyone. My name is Jotaka Eaddy, and I serve as Senior Vice President of Government Affairs for PayNearMe, which is a fintech located here in Silicon Valley.
Great. And I mentioned earlier I'm going to BuildUp.vc, and BuildUp is a pre-accelerator designed to connect, mentor, and educate underrepresented groups who would like to start their startup or possibly get into another incubator accelerator or help raise venture capital or angel investment. And we're really excited about this new series of Pathways to Tech because tech is, everybody's trying to be an entrepreneur, everybody's talking about tech, and versus it could be learning to code. And my two guests today have transitioned to tech, and we're going to talk about their journey in addition to what they think other individuals can do to break into tech. So with that, really, again, thank you for joining this episode. Let's talk a little bit about your journey. How did you get to where you are today?
I'll start again.
Okay.
So I got into tech actually in 2009. I interned at Google just kind of the summer after my sophomore year of college and got hooked. Really enjoyed my internship experience and decided that I wanted to be involved in tech as my kind of career path. So that was my entree into the tech world. And then after my internship, started full-time in 2010 at Google doing enterprise sales, so not in a traditional tech role or engineering role, but on the sales side. But still really just love being involved at such a kind of dynamic and ever-changing company, and kind of got bit with the entrepreneurial bug while I was in Silicon Valley, and that was sort of the roots in starting my own business, which is also a tech business. So that was kind of how I got started in tech.
Great. Jotaka?
So my story is somewhat similar, also different, and I actually come to the tech industry from a political civil rights advocacy background. So I've spent the better half of probably most of my life as an advocate for a very civil human rights. And so I had spent, prior to this role at my current company, PayNearMe, I had spent 6.5 years as a senior advisor to the president and CEO. But I had a set of political skills that were, and I hope still useful to the company in which I'm working for. And so really for me, it was actually really knowing someone who's here, who actually said, I think you have a skill set that would be valuable to this company that I know of. So I hadn't heard of the company as of, before I began to have conversations about joining the company. And so for me, it was an opportunity that came my way, but really it was because I knew someone who said, I think your skill set fits this industry. And so I made what a lot of people would believe and say often is like, oh, wow, you made a really huge leap. The more I've spent in Silicon Valley, the more I work within my company, I'm realizing more and more that while it's a leap in terms of industries, it's not a very large leap in terms of the type of activity that I work on every single day and the skill set that I apply to my job every day.
Awesome. So you both come from, like I said, the exposure And then Jewel, you mentioned you had the internship, and Jotaka, you mentioned you had a exposure, but also you were somebody referred to you. So which is extremely we talk about how it's the network effects to getting a tech from, especially when you're talking about raising venture capital, angel money, or meet with investors. What you think was unique about both of you that where we look at the demographics that let's say that percentages workforce of 2% black, well you were both part of that 2%. What do you think? Do you think there was anything that you did extra to put yourself in that best position? Whether I know, Jill, you took the internship. Did you have somebody say, "Hey, Jill, you need to apply for this internship"? Or Jotaka, you mentioned that you had those people would say, "Hey, come take this job." Do you feel like you went the extra step, and that should other individuals take the extra step?
Yeah, absolutely. No, sorry, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I think you raised some interesting points, Wayne. For me it was, I think, because I knew a set of folks that were in this industry who knew my skill set. That's how I got into the company that I'm in now. I do think, however, we need more internships, and there needs to be more folks willing to look outside of their comfort zone in terms of their Rolodexes and seek a diverse talent base. I mean, when I was even thinking about, when I first was approached about coming into Silicon Valley, I was actually a bit hesitant because the numbers are quite staggering when you look at these numbers of 2% of an entire industry, and the very clear lack of diversity. Someone who has a civil rights background, I said to myself, hey, I have a choice here. I can join this industry, work for a company, with the goal of a double bottom line. One, help build a technology and be a part of innovation that reaches a diverse audience, which what my company focuses on, in addition to being a part of the change that I, as someone who has my entire life been an advocate for civil and human rights and the need for inclusion and diversity, be a part of the very change that I seek to see in this industry. And so I think that beyond, I think, yes, people, and in my case, I think it was the instance of knowing someone. I think, and Jill will definitely speak to her experience, there are people who take and the initiative to participate in internships, but the very reality is I think that there are far too many exceptions to the overall rule when it comes to diversity in Silicon Valley. And I think that it has to start in Silicon Valley, and it has to be a multi-pronged approach to really beginning to change it. So yes, we need to code, and yes, we need to increase the skill set, but there needs to be more internships, and people within the Valley, those that are hiring managers, have to understand and know that there's diverse talent pools outside of their immediate Rolodex.
Great point.
Yeah, and for me, I'm thinking about just reflecting again on how I got into Google and the importance of that internship for me. So when I was a freshman, after my freshman year at Howard University, I interned on Wall Street, and I was in the School of Business. That's kind of where kind of the coveted internships were at the big banks. And at that time, 2007, that's right before everything kind of crashed on Wall Street. And so the summer after my sophomore year, I had the option to return to Goldman Sachs, which is where I interned my first year, or to go to Google. And I credit Stacey Brown Philpott, who was at Google at the time and now COO of TaskRabbit, who she had previously come from Goldman Sachs, and she actually called me and was one of the reasons that I made the decision to go to Google over going to Goldman. And that really, that kind of changed my whole path. So I don't tell her thank you enough for that, but she kind of gave me, she said, I was nervous. I was scared about going to California, and I'm from the South. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee originally. So even just going out there was a big step for me. But folks like her, LaFawn Bailey, who was kind of our recruiter at Howard, they really made the difference for me. So I think it really goes back to sort of reaching back to the schools that you came from, or school. For me, Howard University, always I'm looking out for folks from there, and making sure that they're exposed to tech as a career path, because like I said, during the time I was there, it was very much focused on getting into the banks or getting into consulting. So that was the internship, really, just that exposure. It was like, okay, yeah, I'm not going to be going that route into finance and banking. I'm definitely going to be going into tech, and so that's kind of the difference maker for me.
That's awesome. So there's a lot of conversation, as both of you mentioned, about the workforce in tech not being as diverse, and then there's an additional lot of conversation about why diversity matters, the benefits of it. Does it affect the bottom line? More diverse thinking, more diverse minds and individuals in the room can lead to better innovation. But I don't feel like there's not enough conversation about encouraging or talking to not necessarily the decision makers or HR or CEOs, but to other communities. Like, what, in your opinion, is like, why should we encourage the 2%, the other 98%? No, that's not right analogy. Why should we just encourage other minorities or other individuals that are not the norm to get into tech? What have been some of your benefits you've seen of yourself going into tech as well?
I think for me, and I think there are extreme benefits for diversifying the tech industry. One, there, particularly when you look at the use of technology in communities of color, and how technology actually can be a force for of growth and innovation, but also change. I think that diversity, thinking about the technology that's being created and who's developing that technology, actually it's good for business. When you think about digital payments and the underbanked, and I think that is if you're marketing or if you're audience. And this has been my experience, is that I think all too often, and I can speak that I did this self, is that some folks who would think about going into tech may cancel themselves out. I canceled myself out when I was first approached about just going into my current company. I said to myself, I'm a political advocate, strategist, civil rights advocate. I'm not tech. I don't know how to code. So therefore, Silicon Valley is not for me. I can't thrive in that energy and in that entire environment. What I've learned and what I know now is there are so many jobs that are, quote, non-technical jobs that are very important to all of these companies. And I think that particularly those that are interested in coming into Silicon Valley, I think the first thing that they must do, if they were making that grave mistake that I made, is to mentally cancel yourself out in terms of thinking, I don't really know how to code, I don't have technical background, therefore I shouldn't think about Silicon Valley. And I think equally, I think what Jewel did was thinking about it at a much younger age in college, and really expanding where you're doing internships, and really utilizing your network to venture into an industry that may be an unknown.
Great point. Great point.
Yeah, and I'll talk about that from the kind of more of a startup side, since I've had the experience in working in a tech company and now running my own startup, and having some of those doubts, even though I'm coming from Google, having a lot of doubts about whether or not I can make it as a founder. And it's certainly been kind of a hard journey. Wayne, because you've seen me struggling along the way, but yeah, I mean, just having the kind of fortitude to think that I can actually do it and having this support of the community around me. You know, it's in my family, for example, we have kind of a history of entrepreneurship, but in a different way. So more, you know, convenience stores on my dad's side, and my mom is an insurance agent and has had an agency for the past 18 years. But when it comes to starting from an idea and not a location, that's kind of a different set of struggles, if you will. So just, I think, having the thought that we can create from an idea, create something based on technology, and letting that message kind of permeate through the community, and talking about it. So, you know, lifting each other up. When you talked about this in your session at South by Southwest, but kind of promoting the people who are going at it, I think is going to be super important for the next generation to see that actually we can create from ideas in our mind. We can create with things that we build. That's going to be super important to diversifying the tech ecosystem.
Yeah, great point. I'm gonna switch gears a little bit, and we're gonna talk a little bit, Jewel, about your background. As you mentioned, you had a unique work at Google and your own startup. Um, with that, you know, like, and the challenges of being, you know, a founder CEO who happens to be a female, who happens to be a minority. You know, what do you think has been your biggest challenges in terms of launching your own tech company?
There have been several. So I think that not only am I a female and I'm Black, I'm also doing a tech company that's in a very extremely male-dominated industry, even more so than tech itself. So my company is called PartPic, and we do visual search for replacement parts. So the folks that I'm trying to sell to are, you know, leaders of big industrial manufacturing type of companies, and they typically look nothing like me, and don't, you know, have similar background to me. So I think just gaining credibility and having them actually listen to what it is I'm talking about. I've had pitches where people, you know, I like to wear statement necklaces, and I've had people say, "Oh, I thought you were going to pitch a jewelry company," and I'm like, no. I'm trying to pitch a computer vision company. So, you know, just getting over that piece where, you know, everyone judges based on how you look, and getting to the fact that we've actually built out a new type of technology. We put patents on it. You know, we're doing something that's extremely innovative. But getting past that, oh, well, you don't look like you could do that. That's been, you know, that's been pretty tough, and I've gotten a lot of comments and things that I would be surprised would actually come out of people's mouths. But I've developed very tough skin, so that's good. But I've also, it motivates me. It makes me feel like, okay, most people don't think that I would be the person to pursue such a kind of niche industry. But you know, we're doing pretty well. We were able to win the South by Southwest competition. We're progressing along on our fundraising round. So it's been definitely a hard road. But, and I think, you know, I've even had people say if a white male was pitching this company, he would have been able to, you know, raise $10 million by now. So that stuff is kind of hard to take. But again, I think that it's going to make it that much sweeter when we actually reach kind of our success metrics. And again, part of the reason that I'm doing this is because I want to show other people that, and especially people who look like me, that it is possible, and kind of I've been taking copious notes along the way so that I can teach people how to do it.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. It's interesting. It sounds like part of it is you didn't mention some of the things that traditionally you hear, like what's the hardest part of you know, being a founder is like, oh, building a team, you know, code, you know, raising capital. It's these other psychological barriers, you know, because yes, you are different than a typical, you know, startup founder that you have to be mentally tough to face. So is this something that, you know, it's the biases and these other challenges that we wish that we didn't have to face as, you know, different entrepreneurs in the tech space, so to speak.
Yeah. The building a team and building a technology that didn't exist before, that stuff is really hard too. I don't want to make it seem like that's easy peasy, but the thing, you're right, mentally, it's like getting myself over the thoughts about, well, yeah, if I had handed this to like a white boy I met while I was at Google, maybe he could have ran with it and just gave me a cut of whatever he got. You know, that as a thought that's hard. Like that's really difficult. But you know, more important, I mean, kind of more of the everyday of, you know, filing patents and working with engineers every day who are sometimes difficult to communicate with, or you know, figuring out how do we build a product roadmap, how do we keep investors up to date on every single thing that's going on. All of that stuff, that's super challenging as well, but like I said, the things that go on top of it that are really just mental exercises have been the hardest thing.
Yeah. Well, we're doing a great job so far. You're doing a great job.
Great.
Thank you. So, Jotaka, you work in fintech, and you have this, like you said earlier, this civil rights background. You know, now in Silicon Valley, split between DC. And you talked about some of the skills earlier, but can you recap a little bit, or rehash, like, you know, all these skills you had outside of tech? What roles that how it play in now that you in Silicon Valley, you working with a tech company, and then also, I mean, I believe you're one of the only minorities, you know, at your company. So, like, how does that play the role with everything?
Let me start with the first question, and I think fintech is quite you know, a very interesting space right now. I think everyone is having a conversation. Every time you turn on television, you read any in tech publication, you read any political publication, everyone is talking about digital payments. People are discussing, you know, security when it comes to payments. Like, that's the new thing, you know, Apple Pay, all these other different products, you know, that are out there that's digitalizing payments. But I think particularly in my company, PayNearMe, we're thinking about digital payments for the underbanked, people who don't have bank accounts, and so that's actually just even to just wrap your head around. Trying to even just to have the conversation that there is a segment of our entire nation that don't even have bank accounts. So just imagine you're in Silicon Valley and you're in a place where everything is so digital, and a lot of folks have access, and a lot of folks have you know, all of these quote luxuries when it comes to digital payments at their helm, and begin to have a conversation about a segment of society that probably, you know, very much so does not really exist in this area, or in this direct sort of tangible community. And also fintech, it's equally as it's something that is regulated because you're dealing with payment. So within my job every day, I think there are a number of things. One is really having conversations with stakeholders and people who represent the communities that we serve, to understand that there's this product that exists, that I certainly believe is something that is actually a force for social good. Equally as important ships, in order for, you know, Washington and regulators to understand, you know, you have this new thing, and making sure that people understand that that's good and not hurt people, because I think there's a lot of questions as it relates to whether or not you know, there's increased security or are consumers protected when it comes to financial and digital payments. And so I think when it goes to your second question, as it relates to, you know, my company. I'm one of the few people of African Americans in my company. Those numbers are increasing, and we're actually developing a fellowship program with the sole focus of really beginning to look at how we become a part of the solution in Silicon Valley. How do we bring in young fellows from diverse backgrounds and bring them into the company so that they can be a part of our company and also get those valuable network and relationships in Silicon Valley. So I think that for me, I work for a CEO, I think, that gets it. And I think that's something that likely doesn't exist every place here. But he's someone who gets it. He knows that there is a need for change in the overall ecosystem of Silicon Valley, and it really is committed to being a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. And for me, that makes waking up every single day and going into my office or working with my colleagues that much more rewarding, because I feel like there's an actual ability to make real change.
No, that's great. I like the idea of the fellows program, you know, from your company, and that's a lot of people talk about, like, you know, when they want to look for diverse talent, so to speak, they immediately want to hire engineers, or they just want to say, hey, where can we find black engineers or Latino engineers or just women or so forth, and they don't create, you know, overall strategy of we're just trying to fill this one position. Most of the time they just focus on that, and so having a fellows program that could be a residual or a rolling door is great for exposure, is great for opportunity, is great for, you know, even the culture you bring at the office. So hats off to your CEO and yourself and the company for making it happen. So I want to jump into, you know, a couple more questions, and we're gonna wrap it up. This question, I think, is everybody knows this answer already, but because code is pushed so much, like everybody must learn the code, must learn the code. What are your thoughts? Like there's I've seen a whole conference. I think it's called HustleCon here in the Bay Area, in Silicon Valley, and it's a conference of CEOs of who don't know how to code but built great, you know, businesses. So what are your thoughts on the whole learn the code movement, and then how it impacts, you know, the conversation of STEM to the youth to now to the workforce?
Okay, so I think that it's a great movement. I think that it's cool for a lot of people to know how to code. I personally, I thought that would be my path when I was having trouble early on with PartPic, finding engineers that were good. I was like, oh, well, I'll just figure out how to code and then I'll build this all by myself. Yeah, that didn't work out. I took a few classes, you know, learned enough to know at least what my engineers were talking about, or at least be able to recognize the languages that were important for what we were building. You know, just a little bit, enough to be dangerous. But what I've realized in kind of that path was that there are tons of different languages. There's things that you can definitely pick up within, you know, a short amount of time. Then there's other things that are going to take, you know, a good amount of time to learn and dedication. And so kind of understanding what it is that you're trying to do, I think it's just a blanket message of let everyone just go code, which I don't know how helpful that will be in the long run. And I also think that it's important for people to just get exposure. So the reason I like kind of the hackathons and some of the coding camps or the coding resources that are available online is for the exposure piece. I don't necessarily think that it makes sense for everyone to just become a software developer or an engineer all at once, because the other jobs are really crucial as well. So I think that the exposure piece is great, and I will continue to support that. But I think that people should be a little bit more thoughtful in terms of how they talk about the idea of getting into tech. I think that overemphasis on coding makes it seem like that's your only route into tech. But there's designers are really needed right now, and you don't necessarily need to know how to code to be a designer. Or on the business side, there's a ton of jobs on the business side that are crucial to building great tech companies. So I say overall, I think it's good, but I don't want people to kind of take that message as that everyone has to become a coder to be successful.
Great point.
Yeah, I would echo Jules' point as someone who doesn't know how to code. Folks laugh at me in my office because I actually have a BlackBerry, but I have an Android phone as well. I comment that the President of the United States has BlackBerry as well, so I am not alone. But I think I'm from the South as well. Jules says she's from Nashville. I'm from South Carolina. And one of the things that most who know me will say, I believe that you have to cook a cake, in the oven. You must have a burner at the top and a burner at the bottom if you want a really good cake. And I think you could look at that metaphor as it relates to this question of coding. I think you can't just do one thing and there's no silver bullet, right? So coding is incredibly important because when you look at how do we begin to address the very clear systemic gaps that exist as it relates to technical skills between African American and Latinos and white students, at all stages of education, whether it's middle school, and who's graduating with these degrees. We have to begin to address those gaps, and I think coding programs will be a part of that. But I agree with what Jules said, is that not every job in this industry is a job where you need to know how to code. I think the exposure and having some knowledge of it is important, but I'm fearful that if the conversation is all 100% code, people would begin to believe, like I felt, I felt, well, maybe I don't think I can be successful there. And I was someone who had, passed major legislation in state legislatures, lobbied in the UN, and I was someone who was saying, I don't really think there's anything there for me. But, these, government affairs, dealing with regulations and making sure that your product is, steers, in the right way as it relates to regulations or legal, or, sales, business development, marketing, finance. All of these roles are very important for any company to be successful. And so there are so many jobs and skill set that people can take on in this industry. And so I think while we have to focus on coding, I think that we cannot 100% entirely have the conversation or lead to this notion, this false notion that it's only coding. If you only, that you have to know how to code to be in this industry. I think that can in some ways not help or hurt in some ways, because it just leads to this false notion that you only need to code. Now, I say that 100% supportive of all the coding efforts that exist, from 2040, Yes We Code, Black Girls Code. I think those are absolutely important to begin to address those gaps, but I think we need to increase the conversation that there are other opportunities that are equally as important in this industry as well. So I'd just like to see more camps, like, how do you develop these camps around these other skills as well for this industry?
Great point, and I agree with you 100%. So I'm going to turn on the Q&A and see if somebody has some questions from the who's watching. And also, while I do that, I'm going to ask one more question. So let me enable the Q&A. Awesome. Okay, there's a couple of questions there. So I'm going to ask this question, then we're going to jump to Q&A, and then we're going to call it a show. As a woman in tech, that conversation continues to like be a media buzz. Every time you look at the blogs, there's a different article about, unfortunately something negative happened. In some cases, there's some good news about, some women doing some great, amazing things in tech. Jewel, you won multiple pitch competitions, so that's good, positive stories for women in tech. They're just, entrepreneurs in general. But as a woman in tech, what advice would you give other women in terms of, just breaking in, dealing with challenges, or just to be successful?
I think one thing that I didn't know coming into tech, and honestly, I think it may be, I'm not sure if this is more so a problem because I'm a woman or because I'm black. I'm not really sure, but this is advice I would give to anyone actually, is to be vocal. And I think the reason I say that is because whenever you're coming into a situation where you are the minority, or it's male dominated, I think there is a tendency to be spoken over, or to not stand up for yourself in certain situations. And I think that when I was first coming into Silicon Valley, because I felt like an outsider in a way, I oftentimes I observed, but I didn't speak up as much as I should have. I knew that I had valuable opinions and experiences to bring to the conversation, and I think, just because I wasn't sure how my voice would be perceived, I think I kind of didn't speak up as much as I could have. And over the years, and just working and observing and realizing, kind of coming to the coming into myself, knowing that my voice is valuable and powerful, I've gotten more vocal. But I would recommend anyone who, and particularly for women coming in, and there's a lot of talk about this and taking your seat at the table, those types of conversations. But I really would echo that and say it's important to speak up. And in some of the cases that have recently come up, around women being mistreated or kind of having things said to them that they don't appreciate, I think it's important to talk about it, and to say this is not okay, or this is how I want to be treated. Those things I would recommend to anyone coming into this industry. Is it's important to own your voice and really talk about the things that bother you. Stay connected with other women. That would be my kind of recommendation.
Jotaka?
But I think I wanted to share, this question around being a woman, and when you just think about the industry, and particularly as black women, the numbers on diversity is, they're staggering when you think about how that, what that means for the number of black women. I had an experience. I was at a tech summit event, and I looked around the room, and I think it was maybe 500 people at this summit, and I could count on one hand the number of black women that I saw, and so for one of the it was one of my first experiences of just having this feeling of, oh my goodness, like, just feeling like, how is it that we are in this place where there is such a few number of black women in this room, where there's to be this major conversation about technology. And so for me, it was both a wake-up call, and I think also a reality check. And I think, ultimately we need to get to a place where, that doesn't exist. And I think all too often, when you look in the room, you look at decision makers, and it's very male dominated. And Mignon Moore, someone who I admire a lot in the political arena, was recently sharing a story in the New York Times, that when she walked into leadership in the Democratic Party, she looked in the room, and she was in the room, and now she, as a woman of color is at the helm and is a leader, and said, the folks in this room, if they don't look around and say, because and see that everyone looks like them and not find a problem with it, then we haven't really evolved very far. And I think in the Valley, when it comes to women voices, I think equally as important. Those that are in decision makers, they have to themselves, I think, ultimately realize that it's a problem when you walk in a room and it's decision makers and they're all men.
Yeah, that's great advice and great points from both. Thank you very much, and I'm proud to know both of you individually, and I know that what we're doing, even with this hangout, that is going to hopefully help increase the numbers and bring awareness to both sides of the table, not just in the Silicon Valley and the Bay Area, but also other diverse communities who thought about getting into tech also. So I'm going to jump into, we have a couple of questions. Adrena Graham, let me answer her question. Second question, how do we get women of color who are in the industry to come out more and take part of the conferences and the conversation? Some are happy to keep their heads down and avoid coming out. How do we change that mindset?
So I think it's two sides of that. I think that it's a bit of the onus is on the conference organizers to do a little bit more research and not just go with the names that are always plugged. When you talked about tokenism in your talk as well, which I really I thought your talk was awesome, but I like that piece of it because I think that there's some level of satisfaction that comes from at least one or at least two names being kind of spotlighted, but the reality is there are, thousands of people who are doing great work and are not in the spotlight. So it's partly the role of the folks who are organizing these conferences and events to do a little bit more digging and not just pull the people who are always highlighted. And then it's partly the role of the folks who are doing this great work to tell their story. So there's all these platforms now, and I'm seeing some really great articles come up on Medium and some of the other blogs where people are telling their own stories. And this is something that personally I'm when I get some time, I'm going to be working a little bit more, is doing more writing and more blogging about what my experience has been. But that's part of it too. We'll never know who's doing the work if they don't say, at least raise a hand and say it. And I think that's culturally something that we're not as good at, is tooting our own horns and saying, hey, I just did this really cool thing, really amazing thing. I'm making an impact here or there. So that's part of it too. It's on both sides. It's on the conference organizers to do a little bit more than just the surface, the folks who are always out there, and then it's on the people who are doing this great work to raise their hand and let us know. And then it's on us as a community to promote each other. I was really happy. I love the fact that Google has been so supportive of me in my kind of entrepreneurial journey, and has done posts and Twitter and all of that, and that's helped me kind of spread the message of what I'm doing. But again, it's kind of on us as a community to lift each other up.
Agreed. Jotaka?
I would agree with all of Jules's points, particularly the point that conference organizers, I think it's important that anytime a conference is being organized, are they truly looking to ensure that they're diverse voices, and not just in the diversity space. And I think that's important. Like don't go and look for people of color in the tech industry when you just want to talk about the need for diversity and how do we diversify STEM. But having diverse voices when you talk about how you build innovative technology, or are you talking about every other aspect of the tech industry? Because I fear that conference organizers will think, oh, we're going to have a conversation on diversity in tech, and then we're going to find these diverse voices and put them on this panel, and then you have this imaginary checkbox for your conference or your show. It's like, no, you need to have diverse voices in every aspect of the conversation, and I think that's important. And I agree with what Joel said, that that we as Black women in tech, we have to write more. We actually have to, share our experiences so that others who are interested, or even those who may be in the same arena or similar experiences, can learn. That's something that really, coming into this industry, in the political world and the civil rights and human rights and advocacy world, there's a real strong network of young Black women, young Black professionals, and I would love to see more of that here in Silicon Valley, just really even to learn from shared experiences of others who are in similar situations that you may be in. So I think, to boil it down into 3 points: one, the conference organizers need to really think about how they have diverse voices, not just in the diversity sandbox, but in every aspect of the conversation. I think that equally, number two, those that are in Silicon Valley that have this unique experience should talk about that experience. And then thirdly, I think it's equally as important for there to be a network, a stronger and an increased network of those that just really talk to each other about those shared experiences.
Those are all great points. All great points. I want to additionally add a couple of things here, because people could even look at this Google Hangout and be like, well, we're not diverse, right? Well, and I've seen the cases where people, especially people of color, can attack conference organizers for not having a diverse, speaker pool. One thing I would like to advise, to be hesitant on that, because this is not everybody. Because and also keep in mind, this is not an absolute. There's no absolute checkbox. 100%, 100% some. For example, I know some conference organizers that reached out to hundreds of diverse people to participate of conference, and they didn't get that many participations for whatever reason. And another recent example is, I was a mentor for Tech Cocktail. They had a mentorship sessions at South by Southwest. And one of the organizers reached out to me and wanted to participate, and they said, I'm looking for more women. She said she had 12 women on her list, and all 12 women declined. And at that time, they had about, I think, 5 white guys. I agree, so I was a black person, and then but had 0 women. And then she asked me, like, do I know any women who participate will be at South by, will be interested in being a mentor during their program? And they were not announcing until they at least had 1 female participant, because they didn't want any backlash, so you can't find no women. And so there's always, not always, but most of the time there's people trying. And I think now, I can't say for everyone, but I think now when you see a conference, it is all white. Sometimes we need to ask the why before we assume that, okay, there's no diversity or no women and so forth. But then there's some that I'm just scratching my head on still, that's like, okay, we know they could have got at least 1, you know what I mean? And again, going back to this hangout, I reached out to, I didn't want the session to be all women, but I did reach out to a Latino individual, a white lady, and another African American individual to join. And those other 3 individuals couldn't participate, but I did reach out. And so, to even go with the question, we're going to jump into, got a couple more questions coming in. We're going to do one more. Let's do one. If each one, you can take one of these questions. So, and try to keep it quick when you can wrap up. So we got a question from Curtis Mitchell. Do you feel from Brian Henderson. Sorry, Curtis. From your experience, what positions are available for graphic designers or creative directors in tech? I'm assuming.
A ton. I mean, if you think about it, things should work, but they're more appealing when they look beautiful, right? So there has to be a design element to just about everything we're interacting with. So I'd say every startup team needs a strong developer, a strong designer. I need a designer if you're interested, jewel@partpic.com. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a matter of kind of looking wherever you are located, looking on, I know a lot of the workspaces and sort of tech hubs in various cities have startup job boards. So if you're interested in getting into working with the startup, that would be one way to go. And then in terms of larger companies, also need designers. So just kind of check out the like google.com/jobs or any of the other tech companies out there. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but I'd say the major thing, the most important thing that you need to do is have a very strong portfolio that somebody can just go on your website and take a look at. I've been surprised at the number of designers that don't have very good websites, which to me is just like, yeah, you really need to have a good website if you're saying that you're a designer. So I'd recommend just getting your portfolio together on your website and then going after startups or the larger tech companies, whichever is of interest to you.
Great, great. So I'm gonna end with this. It's a good question. So I'm gonna go back to Curtis's question, and both of you can answer. Then we'll call the show. Do you feel pressure to be more visible in order to be seen by other minorities as a different example of success? Curtis Mitchell. He drops the mic.
I'll say absolutely. I'll give an example and kind of thinking about what you were mentioning, Wayne, about people not responding to you when you asked them to come on this or other conferences. There's one situation where just coming off of TechCrunch, I got outreach from Alexis Ohanian's team who does the Verge Small Empires. And my immediate response was no, like, we're not ready. We don't have everything together. I don't want people to know this part of the story. Like, this is the hard part. And I basically responded to them like, yeah, we're just probably not ready. I've seen some of your other episodes and they're like about great companies that have it all together. And I don't think we're there yet. And they actually, pushed back a bit and said, hey, we want to cover someone who's at your stage, like raising your seed around the funding, just getting really up and going. And I really didn't want to do it, but I ended up doing it. They came to Atlanta, shot it in our office, and since then the video has gotten like over 50,000 hits. Here at South by Southwest, I met like a ton of kids or college students who said, I recognize you from the Verge show, the Small Empire show, and you're such an inspiration to me. And these weren't just Black people. These were all types of people that have come up to me and said that. And so to me, that's like, okay, well, at least it was worth it. To me, it's hard to watch because it's just like, yeah, that was a really difficult week. That week in particular was tough. But just knowing that the story is inspiration, even though we're not completely there yet, even just as far as we've come as an inspiration to other people, to me makes it like, it makes it really worth it. And it's kind of the reason that I want to do it and at least have people know, like, yeah, it's not that easy, but it can be done. So yeah, I think I do feel pressure. I do feel like I have to be better. And that's kind of always in life. That's been a mainstay, but yeah, to answer this question, yes.
Jotaka?
Yes. I think, and my entire background is one where I come from really a space in which. Coming from civil rights, there's, as a Black woman, in civil rights in itself, it's a very male-dominated arena. And so there's always been the pressure to, you feel like, well, yes, I've got to, I got to work harder. I got to make sure that, the value and people, understand that, equally is what I do and what I contribute is equally as important as what the next guy does. I think in this industry, I think that also exists. I think even more so it's just the culture here that, you know, you there's a pressure to, you know, if you're not, you know, on your hustle, you're not on your grind, if you're not very visible, then you may not be as successful. And so I think very similar to that in the political arena, it exists here. And while I've always been, I mean, my personality, anyone who meets me understands and knows, I have a very vibrant personality. I've never been nervous, afraid to speak up. Even when it's not convenient. You know, I watched a very powerful talk by Michelle Alexander, and she said something that really resonated with me during her talk. And she says that you have to be willing to speak up and speak even when it's inconvenient, and speak truth even when it's inconvenient. And so I think equally in this arena, I think that there's often pressure not to speak up whenever you're saying something that people don't want to hear. So I think, you know, and it's important to speak up and really be a voice, but there's also a real, you know, pressure to make sure that you're showing up. And I don't know if pressure is the right word, but I think there's a culture, and I don't think it's a bad culture that it's important for you to have to show up, but I think it very much so exists.
Yeah, well, great, and I can agree with both of you on both those points. And so, again, I want to thank both of you for participating in this very first Pathways to Tech Build Up Google Hangout. And how can people find both of you online?
I am at Jewel Melody on Twitter, Jewel Burks on LinkedIn. Also follow at Excel with Google and at PartPic. Yes.
Well, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Jotaka Eaddy, so it's Jotaka Eaddy. On Twitter, you can also find me on LinkedIn, Jotaka202, and I encourage you to follow PayNearMe at PayNearMe on Twitter.
Awesome. I'm at Wayne Sutton on almost any social network in the world. The company is BUILDUP.vc. On Twitter, we're at BUILDUP.vc. Again, thank you for watching Pathways to Tech, and we wish everyone much success. And as always, keep moving forward.